Let us take this example of 20% stock dividend here. So there's a corporation called as 90 Degree Corporation, and on the date of declaration the stock sells at $50 per share. So here are the entries which are prior to the dividend declaration. So there were 10,000 shares at $1 par value. So this is 10,000 as common stock. The additional paid in capital is 490 and the retained earnings given is 150. So as we have noted earlier that when it is about stock dividends, this final number which is 650, this will not change. So this will still remain as 650000. The only thing that would change is the ingredients in between this. So common stock, additional paid in capital and retained earnings, these may change. So when it was about the 20% stock dividends, this can be classified as small dividends. Okay, the small dividends have been announced, and in this case actually two things happen. So a 20% stock dividend out of this 10,000 shares would mean 2,000 shares have been issued. So 2,000 shares have been issued at 50. So this will be an assumption. So as we did earlier for the common stocks, that each share is divided into two types. One that will be stated at common or the par value, and the other one will be the additional paid in capital. So this 2,000 share at $1 par value will be equal to 2,000, and the additional paid in capital here would be that since we have issued or we are assuming that these shares are issued at $50, the additional paid in capital would be 50 minus 1, that is $49 will be the additional money over and above that par value multiplied by 2,000. So this will come out to be $98,000. So this is the effect because of the dividends that have been declared in the common and the additional paid in capital. So let's look at this common stock. So earlier they had 10,000 shares, now we have the 12,000 shares. So the final number here would be 10,000 plus this common stock as 2,000. So this will be equal to 12,000 here. Now what about the additional paid in capital? The additional paid in capital, the original amount is 490. This is 490, 1, 2, 3, and the additional amount is 98,000. So this will come out to be 588,000. And likewise retained earnings. So the original amount was 150. Now please note in this case the original amount was 150, and these two, common stock as well as additional paid in capital, have increased to an extent of $100,000. And we also know that the final amount remains the same. So retained earnings is basically a plug figure. So we reduce this addition of common stock and additional paid in capital from the retained earnings. So we reduce it from the retained earnings side. So the new retained earnings will be $50,000 here. So here this would be $50,000 and the sum total will be 650,000. So this is how the adjustment can be done with respect to the small dividends. Now let us take another example where 90 Degree Corp has declared and issued a 40% dividend. So here this is a 40% dividend. So obviously by our definition this is a large dividend that has been announced, and since this is a large dividend, we would assume that the accounting or the way it will be treated in the shareholders equity section would be different. So we had seen earlier that in case of small dividends, all three accounts, common stock, additional paid in capital as well as retained earnings, all these three actually changed in the case of small dividend announced. Now when there is a large stock dividend that is announced, please note that there are only two sections that gets affected. One is the common stock and the second one is basically the retained earnings. So only these two sections gets affected. The additional paid in capital is not affected in any way. So let's see how this will be ultimately. So common stock at 14,000, because 4,000 will be the additional shares that will be issued because of the 40% stock dividends. So the common stocks will get affected by 4,000. Here it will be listed as 14,000. The additional paid in capital, since it doesn't get affected, it remains the same. This is 490,000. And the retained earnings section. Now, one more thing that we need to always note here is that in these cases, the shareholders' equity, the final amount doesn't change. So it will still remain as 650,000. So if you visualize retained earnings as a plug figure, this number should be equal to 146,000. So this is obviously reducing 4,000 from the 150,000 of the retained earnings. So what we get is this as 146,000. This 4,000 has been reduced because this is being added here in the common stocks. So the retained earnings provides an offset. So the ultimate total shareholders equity amount still remains the same. So this is how large stock dividends can be treated in the shareholders equity section.